thank you so much for today. And I would like to share some of our experience and my experience working with IAP and partners and communities on conducting community-led research, particularly the community-led survey. And as you're familiar with, right, a survey is one of many other tools to gather data informations, and we focusing on gathering opinions, experience of different groups by asking specific questions. So a survey, right? There are different types of survey for different purposes, and there are different forms of questions as well. Some of the survey questions are short, some have multiple choices that the respondents or participants can answer to. And what I would like us to discuss today is a community-led survey. So the difference with conventional survey is that it's not only about collecting data information, it's also allow some of the exchange of information and insights between community. It's a learning process, it's an organizing tools, as you know. We believe that community-led survey can help community better understand their collective experience, right? Individually, they might have their own issues, their own priorities, their own perspective, but come together as a community. They would better understand how collectively how they perceive a certain situation. And it's also a good approach to include different voices in the community. Often one particular group may have a louder voices than the other. Some groups may be underrepresented. They did not get invited to meetings organized by other actors, for example. And good things about the survey is that you can view the data based on different identities of the participants. You can see the data by gender, you can see the data by the certain identities that participants identified to have a deeper understanding of what their perspective are. And to use in like organizing advocacy and campaigning, the data that the survey create would also help to communicate with government and, depends on corporate actors, those who often they like to see hard data, they convinced by numbers. So yes, I want just to show example of survey data, what community-led survey can provide in terms of the data, right? As you can see here, towards the ends of the survey, you can get information, sometimes called quantitative data. It looks something like this. This is one example that we use. 98% of the survey respondents indicate that they were never consulted during the planning phase of the project. 87% did not know who would benefit from this project. So there are numbers that mean something, right, based on community responses. And these data can be organized differently. You can see here, it can put in text, it can be put as like images with some visualization that, it's easier to understand. It can put together collectively to see the proportions of a certain perspective. And this is one of the ways that we use the survey data to create some visualizations to help better understand what those numbers are telling us. And it's easy for community to also understand these data as well, and as well as other like stakeholders, government, company, development finance institutions. They also easily to see what the community-led data is telling them. You may have already, at this point, you may have already thought through why are you choosing the survey, right? There are a certain advantages that it's standardized, so it can be easily identified. It can be done in a large scale, include wider groups of community. It's often seen as pretty objective and scientific. It's create those numbers that convince policymakers. And it also allows participants to remain anonymous. They don't have to expose their own identity if they're concerned about security. And it can be, compared to other way, it can be inexpensive to collect, but depends on situation. But there are also something to consider, right? There are accessibility issues. It does require ability to read and write at certain point. You need to ensure that participants understand the questions, and as well as the research team. They have to understand the questions in the same way, so the data is consistent. And sometimes the answer are simplistic into choices or numbers. So you need other methods such as focus group discussions, individual interview to make the data more holistic, more complete, right? That are a certain considerations. And I have here some of the steps that we brainstorming with community organizer. And I want you to take a moment, look around these different words and see, what sparked your idea, right? Think about where would you start? What are the most important steps, or which part of this might be challenging for you and your team to do? Or is there any steps that are missing on this picture? How to develop a survey. I know you probably have been already working on this, but there's few steps, starting with who is part of your community-led survey team, part of the research team, who are your participants, how do you develop your survey questions, or if you have some survey template example, how do you adapt that to fit with your situation, and to create a survey offline and online, whatever applicable and suitable for your participants. There's also a step to test the survey questionnaire to see how is it working, is it difficult for participants, and finally to revise and finalize your questionnaires before you go to collect the data. Start with participants. So it's very important in community-led survey to think through who are participants, because the participants are those whose perspective that will represent and reflect in this survey, right? And who in the community should be included, and why are they part of this survey? Because it will be difficult to include everybody in the communities, or if they are affected by the project or the plan, right? So start thinking about that. You might want to consult with people who are active in community, or people who are familiar with community, to determine how you will integrate different of those, but pay attention to those who usually underrepresented or neglected in community to be part of that conversations. So these are some of the guidance questions. Who are we going to ask? How we make sure the data are collected from a group that will be represent the whole community? What are the reasons for selecting them? And how many people are we going to speak with? What are scales of the community we talking about? Are there any potential challenges that we could anticipate from, accessing the participants? Are they located in further from other community? How do you address that? And there is another word, is a sample of viewpoint, right? And this will be different in each situation, but at IIP, we recommend at least collect 100 participants. That's a good number, but in some scale, it could be 400, 500, or even bigger, but we recommend that start with 100. So the data is easily to represent, right? When you work with percentage or some other, yeah. It may not, like talking about scientifically, it may not that matter, but still the reality of 100 people facing certain issues, expressing a certain ideas, that still count, and that's still important. So think through that. Who are your participants? The other important thing is who is part of your research team, right? The number of the team will be different, but usually it's about 10 people that we have seen. The team could also be a combination of, in some situation, every single member are community members. In some place, we have worked with a mix of civil society groups like NGO staff working with community members. But ideally, the majority of the team should be the community members themselves. And there are some tools to help determine who would be part of that, right? Think through different experience, skills that each member bring to the team. You might want someone who could lead the discussion, someone who good at writing, someone who, have a certain skills with technologies, with computer. So think through all of that as you recruit your research team. The other important thing is develop survey questions. So you already identify your research questions, but from research questions, some of them you already think through that it could be answered by a survey. So which part of your research question can be answered through a survey? Think about that, right? And now that you think about, okay, there's the first research questions that could be answered by a survey. And then think about what are different topics or categories from based on your research questions going to survey questions. Are there different types of questions? Are there questions specifically on livelihood? Are there questions on experience in public participations? Or are there sessions on development priorities? Survey questions usually cover like a wide range of topics. And it looks, sometimes it's the questions that ask the answer yes or no. And you could give an answer, maybe, not sure, so that there are possibility of people to answer. Some questions you would allow people to express their comments, and that's very good to hear out their responses. And these questions designed to gather their personal experience. And it could also be what they hope to get in their life, like what their visions, their imagination about certain issues. So after you think through your survey questions, I would recommend test that, right? Test with the research team. You can practice interviewing each other to see, is it clear enough? The survey question shouldn't be complicated. It should be simple. It should be understood easily. And then you revise that questions together with the team. And then you can decide if you want to do this survey offline or online. Offline means your research team would go with a paper and go collect the data. And then you can digitize it later. Online meaning you ask people to fill out by using their phone, right? By email or other ways. So that you can determine. But basically, these are something to consider. I think it's important to engage and consult the community throughout. In my experience, one of the indigenous community we work with, test the questionnaire with them, and the feedback we got was that they want to understand who in the family had the rights to the title. Is it just the husband, or is it the wife? So these are an important elements that sometimes the team overlook, but when we allow the space for community to provide feedback, and it would just improve how the process happening. And there are different ways to build or create a survey questionnaire. I would suggest, look around and see different format, how it looks. Some people put it in like a blog form, different tables, or some people include some images, right? When you're asking them about trees, so that you image cartoon of tree. So that also help people understand. So assuming now you have your research team, you have your final versions of the questionnaire, right? And you ready to go. Your research team is going to collect the survey. Something to consider is the system, how each research member would collect, right? We recommend adding numbers, so you keep track of, okay, the numbers go to this community, or who is responsible for these copies. Part of the consultation is to give prior notice when requesting to interview or collect data with the community, and consider how and when would be the best for your participants, right? Are they busy at a certain time? Is it a good time to go at the daytime or in the evening? Their harvesting season or fishing season. So these are very important. But as your research team is already a member of community, they could make that suggestion and decisions. And also, these are a few agreements that the research team could come up with, right? When you go and interview or collect survey, what would you do? What are steps? Explaining what is the research and survey is about, why you're conducting this, explain how are you going to use these informations. If you already done in like collective community meeting, maybe just emphasize that to the individual participants. Explain that the information will be kept confidentially. If they wish that their personal information will not be published, for example, right? And at any point they can withdraw participation from the research, depends on their assessment. Ask if the participant has any questions before you start, and also, ask them if they want to participate. So these are part of getting that consent. So not everyone could read or write, so consider different ways. You can read it out loud, listen carefully, using some images to help gather information. Another important things as the research team go collect data is how to record the response. So listening or to the participants, right? It's important to record the answer that the participant choose, and any stories, any quotes, any statement, write down as much as possible in detail. That will help you understand, the story, bigger trends, the certain concerns, issues that community are doing. That will be very helpful when you analyze the data and use that data for further actions. And the good practice would be ask one questions at a time, right? And listen carefully. And some participant might go on and on talking about different things at the same time. So give them that time to respond to the questions. Like, I know there are lots of questions there. You want to get through all of them, but I think it's important to have that exchange. And in situation where people have a lot of things going on, bad experience, trauma. These questions might trigger something emotionally. They may never get asked these questions before. So be supportive and patient. You can practice with the research team. How would you react to a certain situation? What if the participants start crying? What would you do? What if they stop? What would you do? So these are to help encourage people to tell their own story. So after collect all the survey, right? The next step would be data entry. So this is important because how would you understand what are these survey means? What are they telling us? It's important to use a database. This would require, there are several ways you can do this, like manually offline. Yeah, there are ways to do that, but I would recommend if it's possible using a kind of database and program. This will require some internet connections and equipment like computers. At IIP, we use SurveyMonkey to support the community, right? So you need to set up the survey in SurveyMonkey or other software that you use, and they should look exactly as the paper that you're collecting with the community, so that when you enter the data, it's matched. And it's important to test the database that you are using. Just fill survey to see if it's work or if there is any error. Sometimes the questions orders are a bit messy, and make sure to remove those test data afterwards. Once you have all the data, it will be so easily to analyze and understand. And discuss among the team as well. There might be a particular questions that difficult to input or difficult to interpret. Make sure you have that discussions and also practice, right? Each research team member should practice how to enter the data. That's very important. And set up a system. Okay, this is the survey that already input, and this is still need someone to put it in, so you don't duplicate the data in your database. Three important thing is input answer exactly as they are in the survey. If they leave it blank, then leave it blank. Don't try to answer that for them. Double check the work. If you complete all of them on paper, on the database, on the SurveyMonkey, for example, and ask your team if you're not sure about how do I input this. So check in with the team. Yeah. The next thing is analyze the data. So after you organize the data, you can do that online, you can do that offline. Now it's important to understand what the data is saying. And in other words, what the community are saying collectively. That will require you to review each questions, the answer from each questions, calculate them into percentage, who select what answer, how many people say yes, how many people say no, and note down similar ideas. Try to find the trends in the answer, what majority people are saying, maybe. And if you are using software or database like SurveyMonkey, you will be able to organize it differently. I just want to show you. So on the left side, these are the overall survey, right? Everybody mixed, and you have somebody say yes, you have somebody say no to the questions. Do you know who is funding the project? On the right-hand side, when you filter the data from SurveyMonkey, like to see what are the responses only from the women. And you could see that no women say yes. So nobody knows, no women know who funding the project. What's that telling us about this data, right? So this is important to understand different perspective, different experience, even within the community. So using the database like this can help you do that easily. And any other thoughts or questions about that before I?
Just which reminds me of also thinking about the demographics. So in each survey there is a part either at the beginning or at the end, up to you, where you just take down details about that respondent, whether it's a man or a woman. What you could have age groups, you could have I don't know, employment and like source of livelihood. You could have whether they are community leaders or not. So just it's good to think in advance about those will be your categories for disaggregation essentially, and it's good to think in advance about which perspectives do you want to highlight, and which, like when you identify trends, how would you want to disaggregate that total finding that applies to the general population. You definitely want to have to be able to single out the perspectives of women or the responses of women, but what other characteristics make sense. Thanks, Tom, for this. So yeah, again, of like ethnic state or religion, maybe they make sense too, because maybe there are some additional discrimination factors that you want to highlight.
If you look at our templates, we also use a lot of open-ended questions. That means the questions that try to get a wide range of response. And this particular questions that I like is it asks, if you could talk with the project developer and government officials, what would you like to tell them? And this is towards the end of the survey. And you got a wide range of questions, interesting thing, because people don't get that opportunity, right? So it's important to get the ideas, and you can, gather them and actually deliver them to the government or the project developer. Yeah, so there are types of questions like this that allow, community to express their opinion. And also the database such as SurveyMonkey organize it pretty easily. The last part, I know we're going a bit over time. The last part is, so after you analyze data, how do you share your research finding? How do you share the result of the community-led survey? At IP, with partners and community we work with, we use the data visualization. We use infographic, right? Putting in the numbers into accessible ways, but there are different ways you can write report. You can make some artwork, make a video, make different things. The idea is to get this important data to share with the communities, of course, and then they could decide what they want to do with this data, who they want to share it with. Do they want to share it with some key decision makers, government, development finance institutions? So it would be helpful for community to think through that as well. You may already consider this, right? There are some safety and security considerations throughout the process. It's good to assess what risk are you facing. It might be different for each community, and it changes over time as well. Do you, take pictures? How you communicate among your research team? Things about different risks. Are you okay if someone get access to information? It also include some basic stuff like, how do you store your survey? You put them in the safe place with lock and keys, and designated people can access to, or anyone that come to your office can see the survey, right? And some of the simple steps we do is we always separate the information of the participant page from the rest of the questionnaire. So after we input stuff, we would separate them. So if someone happened to found them, they wouldn't know who exactly answered to that. Just if the security assessment dictate that. Yeah, that's are some of the considerations. There are some more details and step-by-steps in our community action guide on community-led research. The first one, the first booklet have those detailed. The checklist is what I showed earlier. It's walk you through different steps and a few materials that might be useful, a few resources, and also there are survey templates that you can see as inspiration and adapt, and these are available in several languages.